Please talk to the audience.
Hello, everyone.
Okay.
I'm trying to see if I can be heard.
Yes. So you guys can hear? Okay, very good. So let's start again from the beginning. Please, let's just pretend that nothing happened and just give your really quick bio, and then let's go to describe some of the events that have been happening to you since we went live the last time, and then you'll move right over to describe what happened with the missile crisis.
Okay, real short version of the bio. Son of a defense engineer, spent 40 years working on radar countermeasures, radar countermeasures, same stuff for laser, infrared, things of that sort. I went into military aerospace. I worked 11 years for Hughes Aircraft Missile Systems Group. We built almost every tactical missile in the inventory: Phoenix missile, the TOW anti-tank missile, the Maverick anti-tank missile, GBU-15 guided bomb, a bunch of other things. We also built the thing they call the AMRAAM or AIM-120 Slammer, which is now in service. And then I moved on to Rockwell, where I was supposed to do Soviet strategic threat analysis, and wound up doing operational readiness and supportability, which is how fast can you turn an airplane around, rearm, refuel it. We had to protect the pilot against nuclear, biological, and chemical threats, things of that nature. I'm a founding member of the Directed Energy Weapons Working Group at Rockwell, which is now owned by Boeing. Hughes is now owned by Raytheon, at least the parts I worked for. And I worked on the AC-130U gunship. I worked on the B-1B. I worked on the maritime patrol aircraft. I worked on an advanced close air support plane. And the last program I worked was National Aerospace Plane, the military version. That was a special access program with multiple levels of security. You had to be read into each one. I had all of those tickets. I was cleared for secret, foreign warning intelligence sources and methods involved, critical nuclear weapon design information, special access tickets on NAST, and a bunch of other things. And was in the process of being cleared for top secret when I left military aerospace in June 20th of 1989. Since then, I worked on Panama Deception, which was an expose of Operation Just Cause, the invasion of Panama, and the historical background. I won the Academy Award. I have a primary research credit in that. I was interviewed in None Dare Call It Murder, which is about the Vince Foster murder. And I've worked on a bunch of other projects. Now I have this blog that's exploding. So that's the short overview.
Okay, talk about your blog exploding.
Well, in the space of a handful of weeks, it went from we were thrilled to have 25 visitors a day to we've had as many as 20,000 plus. And a lot of that has had to do with the exposure from being on your show, and we're very grateful for all the traffic. People who've never heard of the blog, John Kettler Investigates, or you can just type www.johnkettler.com and it'll take you right there. I've got really good sources both on the planet and off the planet. And we can get into that later on if you like. And then do you want me to segue into the missiles?
Yeah, why don't you do that? Except this time when you explain the missile situation, could you please do the setup? In other words, describe for the people that don't know what we're talking about, what was the threat or implied threat, and then how was it handled? And if you could do kind of a blow-by-blow on that.
Okay, I'll try. I received word from one of my highly cleared terrestrial sources that the U.S. had detected the arrival and the beginnings of preparation for firing of what was initially thought to be 10, but turned out to be 20 North Korean supplied what they call Masudan missiles. These are copies of the Russian R-27 or SSN-6 submarine-launched ballistic missile, but just like the Iraqis stretched Scuds during the first Gulf War, these are stretched R-27s. They have about 2,800 nautical mile range, which from Maracaibo, Venezuela, which is basically the area they were located in, could cover almost any target in the, what we call the lower 48, the contiguous United States. The count was later revised to 20 each TEL or transporter erector launcher. Had one missile assigned to it plus a refire missile. Information that we got was that the North Koreans, in addition to supplying the missiles, supplied biological warfare warheads, which we believe to be militarized anthrax in one case, and something that just dissolves the lungs on inhalation. We don't really know what it was. Apparently the Pakistanis supplied dirty bomb warheads, and the whole thing was funded by Iran. The missiles were transported from North Korea to Venezuela, unloaded. We're not sure where, because we didn't find out about this till some sort of overhead reconnaissance asset detected the missiles in a clearing. President of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, expected tribute from the drug cartels for moving through his territory, and when he was denied, he rather foolishly threatened to drop missiles on the main transit route for the cartel through Mexico. So the cartel got all excited about this and vowed vengeance, and was in the process of hunting for the missiles when an off-planet source delivered a map marked with a big X where his missiles were. So the cartel staged a ground assault, caught half of the guards, a fleet essentially, and with RPG and small arms fire, RPG, rocket-propelled grenade, that thing you see in street fighting on all the TV clips, destroyed 10 of the missiles plus 10 of the reserves and the launchers. The next go-round was that after working some bugs out of their systems, the extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional group, conducting a firing from above, a test firing, took out 7 of the remaining 10, and a bunch of the reserve missiles, theoretically leaving 3 and a couple of refires, which were later observed to be put on crude launchers. Next time reconnaissance saw it, all of a sudden there's 5 missiles on 5 TELs, which wasn't good. But it later turned out that the 2 of the TELs had been badly scorched and beaten up before in the earlier attack, and had been cleverly repainted to make it look like he had more than he really did, and those were subsequently destroyed. So that particular missile threat is gone. I can tell you that as a result of some of that, it was information was obtained which indicated through several open sources that a large defense complex was being put in on the Paraguana Peninsula to include a missile complex, surface-air missile defenses, special forces encampment, and a bunch of other things. And there was one picture published in one of the open sources that got one of my high-level contacts very excited and worked up, and the net result was that the entire country of Venezuela, which is not routinely surveyed by our reconnaissance satellites, it is quote-unquote under a microscope right now. They're looking for anything and everything that's out of the ordinary. So we were facing one of the worst threats probably in the history of the country, and the American public was denied the information. Wide word is that the government wants us to keep our eye firmly focused on the Persian Gulf, where the New World Order types are busy doing everything they can think of to foment World War III. Either through a false flag operation, such as has been reported torpedoing the USS Enterprise with an Israeli sub and blaming it on the Iranians. The Iranians have threatened to do things. The Israelis are determined to attack. The extraterrestrials, extra-dimensionals are warning Israel not to do anything or it will pay a very heavy price. And recently they demonstrated their capabilities in full daylight when they removed in front of press, merchant ship crews, and warship crews from several countries, no less than 40 Iranian naval vessels of various sorts, many of them impressed civilian vessels loaded with explosives, and somebody at the controls and a contact fuse to ram into the tankers. Broad daylight, poof, they all went away.
Okay. I appreciate all of this. It's fascinating information, if true, but I need to sort of separate it all out so that we can kind of drill down on each thing, if you don't mind.
Right.
And I do appreciate that you've basically been giving us sort of an overview here. I want to go back to the Venezuela situation for a moment because I did have some feedback in that regard, and I want to make sure that we understand what it was you were saying about that and what really did happen over there. I've got a person who apparently has somebody who's in the military in Venezuela. They were, I guess, born in Maracaibo, and they're talking, basically they believe that the port that you were talking about that the missiles would have had to go into would have been way too obvious, and that that there's no way that they could have been sort of have had missiles out there on display and the people not know about it. Do you know how the missiles were transported into the country?
We know that they arrived aboard a North Korean container ship, name unknown, and quite possibly changed since. They did not come through the Panama Canal. They came a long way, and the U.S. did not detect the missiles until the missiles were in the clearing, being beginning stages of fueling. These are liquid-fueled missiles. They take some time to fuel, and it's a very dangerous process. The propellants are what we call hypergolic, which means they explode on contact unless you've got them in, carefully designed reaction chamber. So you're talking about hydrazine, a drop the size of a pinhead will kill you on contact with your skin, and fuming red nitric acid would lead a hole through you in record time.
Okay, so stop right there. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just so that we understand what's happening here, because I understand that you have a military background. A lot of our listeners will not. I certainly don't. At this moment, you're saying it came in on a container ship. I assume that the container was then transported from what, a ship to the back of a truck?
Possibly. We really don't know.
Okay.
We, the U.S., did not detect the missiles until they were in a clearing in the jungle near the beach.
Okay, that's better. Okay.
Near Maracaibo.
Near Maracaibo? You're saying near Maracaibo. In a clearing in the jungle.
Not in. Near. And I've identified a place up Route 6 that kind of fits that criteria, but I've never been given any kind of grid coordinates for where this is or anything like that. But I'm a pretty good analyst. I used to have to do things like lay out where enemy systems were on the battlefield according to doctrine and things like that. So
really,
I'm pretty good.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so when you say
I looked at the. Go ahead.
When you say there were the missiles were then being fueled, they didn't come in with fuel in them? if I'm understanding
No,
you
they did not.
correctly?
No, they did not.
Okay, and
No,
then,
they're hollow, thin shells, basically, that are pretty fragile. And then what you have to do, because if you get a puncture in one of those things while it's fully fueled, I don't know if you remember the movie K-219, but they had a leak in a missile just like that, and they had a terrible fire on board the submarine because of it.
okay, but so you're saying they came unfueled and they had to put fuel in them. Are you saying they put the fuel in them in this jungle location?
Yes, yes, there were special fueling vehicles to transport the hydrazine and the fuming red nitric acid. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and was
it's
it
a very tricky process?
okay? And during the fueling of these, there were 40 of them. Is that correct?
Total of 40 missiles and 20 launchers. Yes.
Okay, and are the launchers? Is this the kind of thing you could see if you fly over?
Yes.
Okay.
That's how we knew how many there were.
Okay.
Once we were alerted to the presence of the missiles, we started all kinds of overhead reconnaissance.
And this is the human contingent, right?
Yes. Well, believe me, the upstairs contingent was also keeping an eye on things.
Right.
And
Okay.
working out the rather tricky problem of firing a weapon interdimensionally, if you would. Firing from outer space is tricky enough. Firing down through successive dimensions is even more exciting. And so there were some test firings, and sometimes things worked well and other times they didn't. But they did a good job in the end on the missiles, and the missiles are gone. But one of the important points that I would like the listeners to take away from this is that we had essentially a second Cuban Missile Crisis, and it was all but completely kept out of the mainstream media.
Yes.
There were a few brief snippets here and there, and the government just squashed the story.
Okay, when you say okay, stop right there. I'm sorry, John, I'm going to have to keep stopping you because, this is all maybe very simple to you, but it's not going to be simple to me, and it's not simple to my listeners. And so at this point, you said there were a few snippets, I assume you mean out in the press, about this incident. What, can you be more specific? Do you know where in the press?
No, I do not. All I heard was that there were a few little pieces here and there, and after that, the government clamped down across the board on it.
Okay.
And the story never grew legs, as they say.
I see. Okay, now the missiles are sitting in the jungle. At that point, you started talking about the cartel, and what it sounded like is moving things across the border. So how did we jump from this point to the point where you were describing about the cartel and all of that?
Okay. Hugo Chavez expected tribute or a certain amount of money to be paid to him by the drug cartel.
For the missiles?
I'm not going to get my force. No. In order to transport drugs through Venezuela, he expected money to be paid to him.
And how does that? Why does that come up when we're talking about the missile crisis?
Because when he didn't get the tribute that he felt he was owed, he unwisely threatened to drop some of these missiles on the main transit route that runs through Mexico that the cartel uses. At this point, the cartel got
I'm sorry. This sounds really mad. And I'm not criticizing you. I'm just trying to think. I just want to understand how this military leader would take these missiles. What is their radius of destruction? One missile, what would it do?
Depends on what it's loaded with. If it's a dirty bomb, you're talking a radius of destruction of possibly miles. You're talking about dumping a bunch of radioactive waste out with a big explosive charge behind it. So it creates an area of enormous contamination. If they dropped one on a city, they'd probably have to evacuate the city.
Okay, so why would they do this?
Radiation are,
Why would they threaten the cartel in Mexico just over? I mean, in other words, isn't that kind of like overkill?
well, Hugo Chavez is not renowned for his mental or emotional stability. Let's put it that way.
Okay,
Okay?
do you realize
So
that's
he's a
kind of
hothead.
really okay? But because I mean, other people have heard that he's actually somewhat logical. You know, in other words, he developed his own oil, resources, and basically isn't falling for the U.S. Kind of trying to corral and run his country like most of the other South American countries and Central American countries do. So, do you know? Why are you sort of saying? In other words, you seem to have a negative take on this particular ruler, whereas in some circles I hear that he's actually more level-headed than the norm.
Well, I think anybody who would threaten to drop, biological or any kind of nuclear warheads on the cartel has some, at very least, deficits in the quality of his thinking process. How's that for?
Okay, so he threatened the cartel to drop some of these missiles because he wasn't getting his money. Meanwhile, Iran has given these missiles to Venezuela with a purpose in mind, haven't they?
Yes. Ostensibly, they are a deterrent against an attack on Iran by either the U.S. and or Israel.
Okay, but how did that work out for Iran?
Is that if Iran is attacked, the missiles fly.
I understand, and you said they had the range, the capacity to get to U.S. cities and all of that. We discussed that last time, right?
Yeah, essentially almost any part of the lower 48 could be hit by these missiles.
Okay, but at that point,
very serious threats.
Right, and at that point, what now you're talking, I mean, because you've made this jog over to the cartel and to him wanting money and threatening the cartel, but meanwhile, Iran might have something to say about that because that's not the purpose of the missiles, right?
So far as I know, but you know the expression, possession is 9 points of the law.
Okay.
I should also tell you that we know that both Iranians and North Koreans were in that contingent too.
What does that mean? They were in that contingent. What contingent?
That North Korean technical advisors apparently came over with the missiles, and there were some Iranians involved, perhaps to supervise.
Okay, and now you're saying that your off-world contingent then got involved, but what did the U.S. military, assuming the U.S. military would be right on this like white on rice, as they say, why would they even allow for interference from off-worlders in dealing with their missile crisis? Do you know?
The U.S. military is very, very badly overextended. It has been fighting war after war after war. I think, 9 years in Iraq. We're still in Afghanistan. It's so bad that when the Marines got a new kind of landing craft, they had to borrow a tank from the Army, if you can believe it, because the Marines have no tanks left. That's how ground down our ground forces are. Okay, we've been flying lots and lots and lots and lots of missions. The aircraft are worn out. They need spare parts. It's just very bad.
Are you sure? I mean, no, I'm sorry to question you here, but I know you've got very good intelligence on the planet, and I'm just wondering, I have often thought that this idea that they are overextended in their military and that they don't have the equipment they need, et cetera, I've actually thought that this is a ploy.
No, it's not a ploy. A ship just got back in from 330 some odd days of continuous deployment. and the crew got liberty not once in that whole time. They are talking about, because of personnel cuts imposed by Congress, they're talking now about routine deployments of 10 to 11 months in the Navy.
And that's a long time?
Guard, you've got National Guard units that have done, 3 combat tours.
Okay, but still, this is a missile crisis. So you're saying that at this point, the off-world contingent then stepped in. Are they working with any of the military?
Not that I'm aware of, no. They are here to liberate the planet from the reptoids and the Greys. They're here to crush the NWO and a few things along those lines.
Okay.
But one of the things they're here to do is stop wars from breaking out, which have the potential to create World War III. They already stopped one such attempt in the Persian Gulf already, and they're working overtime and around the clock to stop the latest effort to do that. The forces in the Gulf are, it's a real powder keg, and people are playing with matches around the loose gunpowder, let's put it that way. The U.S. has 4 carrier battle groups in the Gulf right now.
All right. So, but you then said that they intervened on this, and they basically, well, it sounded like they took the missiles off world. Is that correct?
They did what?
Back to the missile crisis, they took those missiles. Are you saying the off-world contingent took them off-world or interdimensional?
No. Okay, there's some confusion here. After Chavez made the threat against the cartels decided, apparently they somehow knew the missiles were in country, which isn't surprising given the number of people they have in the contacts, but they didn't know really where they were. So they had forces out looking for them. And apparently the story I get from the off-world contingent, if you would, is that a map was thoughtfully tinted over a leader's face on which was marked a big X that says Chavez's missiles here. So, armed with this information, they went and checked it out, found it was true, and staged a ground attack with rocket-propelled grenades and small arms on the missile battery, or whatever the right term is. It's probably more like a brigade would be the right term, given the quantity of launchers.
Okay, so you're saying a contingent of who? Were these Marines? What were they?
They were Venezuelan troops guarding the missile launchers. But unfortunately for the first batch, they were asleep. So basically what happened was their world came to a horrible end very quickly. Because they were asleep when attacked, and the missiles exploded, and the reserve missiles exploded, and I don't know how many guards were lost. I never did get a number on that, but they were caught flat-footed.
Okay, but who launched the attack?
The cartel did, aided with location information supplied by the ETZDs, if you will.
Okay, so the cartel, but you're relating to the cartel. Are you saying that this is the New World Order? The drug cartel?
I'm saying that Chavez really torqued off the cartel. The cartel vowed to get even. It knew he had these missiles. It went looking for them, but it did not know where they were.
I know, but why would the ETs, why would the off-worlders help the cartel?
Because the object of the game, from their standpoint, is to make the missiles go away. And if somebody else is willing to do the work, then all they've got to do is provide the little navigational support, if you would, then that's a good way to go. It fits in with their preferred mode of operation.
Well, that's just
So,
incredible. Okay, so then you're saying, but you had just told me the radius of these bombs, et cetera, et cetera. Aren't we talking about, I don't know, some huge, in-country, I don't know, nuclear fallout issue in around this area of the jungle?
I don't know that there's any significant radiation count associated with it. It's believed from everything I've heard that the explosion was so violent it dissipated it. I don't really know the details on that. And
But
so
come on,
that was,
really, John, I just have to ask you though, 40 missiles of each single missile having this sort of bomb radius of, God, a whole city each, let's say each. It would decimate the entire country of Venezuela if they destroyed all of them.
well, but we're talking about the difference between blowing them up on the ground versus bursting them in the air where they can disperse over a large area. Okay? I'll give you an example. During the Cold War, a Russian city called Sverdlovsk had to be partially evacuated after what was supposedly an outbreak of horse anthrax. In reality, the Russians had a biowarfare facility there. Something went wrong, it got loose, and the problem was so severe, not only did they have losses of both people and animals, but they had to repave areas because they couldn't get rid of the anthrax spores. Okay, military-grade anthrax is much, much smaller than the regular naturally occurring spores, and much nastier as well. So the huge fireball as the missiles went up apparently consumed the biological warfare warheads, and I'm not sure, but in some manner apparently dissipated the radioactive material. I don't pretend to know how. Okay, so basically, in a nutshell for the listeners, the cartel was going to attack the missiles anyway if it could find them. The off-planet contingent simply provided a map. They're here, So the cartel did the attack and destroyed half the missiles. And in subsequent attacks, using a variety of means, the rest of the missiles were destroyed. Okay, but not by ground attack. At least not by the cartels. So the descriptions from the reconnaissance imagery was that the whole areas were blackened and churned by the strike from above, and the launchers were obliterated.
Okay, so but in essence, the cartel did the bidding of what would in essence be the I believe the U.S. military. Is that correct?
No, that's not true either. The cartels decided on their own to act, and the ETs simply guided them to what they planned on doing anyway.
Huh. Okay.
Okay. The cartels weren't working for the U.S. military. Certainly, I've heard nothing to indicate this. They were going to attack. They were simply guided as to the where.
But you do know that there's a direct relationship between the drug cartels and the Black Project community, in which they're basically funding those Black projects. So in a certain sense, the cartels are actually loosely probably run by Bush. You understand?
I'm well aware that drug money figures very prominently in financing Black projects, yes, along with gun running, human trafficking, along with other.
Right. So when all's said and done, I don't believe. I mean, I don't know what your intel is, but it does not appear to me that the cartels would be allowed to even take out that targets, so to speak, without the okay from probably pretty high levels of the U.S. military, because they don't operate all that independently over there. As I say, they are working in essence for these people, basically the Bush family and others, I imagine. Okay, but that's a side issue. So at this point, you're saying the cartels were given the information to locate the missiles. They took them out. You don't know how big of an explosion it was, but you assume because they were still on the ground that they didn't decimate the entire country of Venezuela, or we might have heard something about it in the news, right?
Well, the attack by the cartels left a 28-foot diameter smoking crater in the ground and blew down trees all around to a considerable distance, so that it was likened to a landing pad for helicopters, according to the sources I talked to. So it had to be a pretty big explosion. I mean, a 28-foot diameter crater is a lot bigger than many people's swimming pools.
Okay, so okay, let me ask you this. In terms of your intelligence on the ground, they became aware, I'm sure, using the satellites, of what was going on in Venezuela, right?
I don't know exactly how we became aware, but we became aware. We found the missiles, I guess, shortly after they arrived at the jungle clearing. We detected the fueling vehicles and various other things that would be associated with such missiles. We observed crews in super-duper protective equipment starting to fuel the missiles. We observed the progression as missiles were fueled, and we knew at a certain point that all of the missiles were fueled, including what you could call the reloads or the refire missiles. So you've got 20 missiles in ready-to-fire condition and 20 more ready to be loaded by a crane with a special heavy-duty wide canvas sling to handle a fully loaded liquid-fueled missile. Out of the section attacked by the cartel, pretty much the only thing that survived intact was the crane vehicle, which is another big cross-country truck. Anybody who's ever seen a Scud launcher on any programming knows what I'm talking about. It's a high-riding, six-wheeled, cross-country capable truck called a Maz 543. And the missiles that the North Koreans supplied were stretched so that they weighed in at the maximum carrying capacity of the Maz 543. So they were even longer range than what the Russians used during the Cold War.
Okay. Your intelligence on the ground here, the human intelligence, do they talk to you about the off-world contingent?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And what do they say? Are they in touch with them? Are they only listening to what you're telling me, for example? In other words, you tell them your interactions, or is there some kind of dialogue going on?
Well, they're not talking to them, but I am. In this particular case, I received the information about the missiles from my ground sources, and I passed the information to the off-planet contingent. The U.S., as I said, was overextended, and it was felt that more could be done faster with off-planet help. There wasn't really a whole lot the U.S. could do because most of its forces are elsewhere. In fact, they were intercepting U.S. troops returning from Iraq and shipping them over to Israel for what was being portrayed as military exercises, but was really the dress rehearsal for the planned invasion of Syria and Iran. And enough publicity was brought to bear that the exercises were postponed for an extended period. I think about a year out from now. But in the meantime, Israel has already secured overflight permission from Saudi Arabia and Iraq to create air corridors through which can strike Iran.
Okay. Okay, I appreciate.
Very serious stuff.
I would like to get over to discuss the whole situation in Israel and what's going on over there. But before we do that, what I want to do is get a little more background as to how your sort of Earth contacts are dealing with this intelligence that you're giving them. Okay? Because we can, supposedly, people could find out whether or not indeed what you're telling them is correct, right? Through contacting the cartel, they could find out what was going on the ground.
And later on, certain cartel leaders were met with, and they were very, very annoyed with the Iranians for being associated with this, because Iran funded both the payment for the missiles and their delivery fees. And 3 of them were handed over by the cartels to the U.S. military, or somebody, I don't know exactly who, and are presently guests at Camp X-Ray, Guantanamo Naval Base, Cuba.
Who are guests?
3 Iranians captured by the cartel when they took down half of the missiles.
Okay, what happened to the North Koreans?
I don't know. I'm
Okay.
presuming that they died. But I was told that 3 Iranians were captured, and the cartel was very, very angry with Iran, and was only too happy to hand them over to certain U.S. representatives, who they were, what agency they hailed from, whether they were military. I couldn't tell you. All I know is they handed them over to our people, and they're now, as I say, guests at Camp X-Ray, where no doubt they are being very carefully interrogated as to everything they know about this whole thing and whatnot.
Okay, but the key element as far as the off-world contingent is that they gave them a map or whatever telling them where the missiles were. But isn't it possible that they already would know that information using their own satellites?
Well, apparently, the cartels don't have satellites, first of all, that I know of.
Well, the U.S. government does, and as I said, there's a direct relationship.
Okay, but you're getting the story from me as I understand it from my sources.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
But, so what they said is they had no way of knowing other than getting it from the information from this off-world contingent, right?
They were looking for the missiles. They knew the missiles existed, but they did not know where they were. And finding mobile missiles is a very complex problem, even if you've got overhead resources and everything else. They come with camouflage nets and various other things. You have to know what to look for. You have to know where to look.
Okay.
I don't know much about Venezuela, but I'm sure there are parts of it that are pretty wild. Okay, so...
Right, but you did say they were located by the jungle, by the beach, right? In the jungle by the beach.
They were in a jungle clearing, something like 6 meters apart, which is just astounding if you know anything about tactical dispersion. Roughly 60 yards for those who aren't metric. Very closely spaced together, which made them easily attackable, and they were. But yes, I was told in a jungle clearing near the beach, practically on the water. And I found such a place on Google Earth, and I think that's probably where they were, up Route 6, north of Maracaibo, up where the jungle starts.
Okay.
Maracaibo itself is desert-like.
Okay, but how are your sort of contacts on the ground relating to the fact that you are publishing all of this information? And how is the U.S. relating to what happened in Venezuela as a result of the cartel getting this information to, in other words, what is the background you've gotten in that regard?
Okay, you're saying, is the government reacting officially to what I've published? Is that the question?
That's part of the question. What I want to know is, look, you have sort of undercover contacts that are on the planet, right? And they know they're feeding you information, right, about, I assume, the movements of the cartel, for example, or is the information about the cartel coming from the off-planet group?
It was a combination of things there. I was told by my ground sources, if you would, that Chavez made the threat and the cartel was, looking for the missiles. I was told by the off-planet contingent how the missiles were found. I was told by my terrestrial sources what happened and what was observed in the reconnaissance imagery that was taken after the attack, and it kind of ping-pongs back and forth in that manner.
Okay, so
you get reports of certain things happening. You sit and you wait for the reconnaissance imagery to come back for the analysts to go over it, and they say, well, there were X number of things here, and this is the state that we assess things to be. So many launchers destroyed, so many fueling vehicles damaged, and things like that. And it was the opinion of U.S. intelligence that probably some of the missiles and or the tells in the second half of the missile force, if you would, were damaged, but we did not know to what extent. We thought that probably some of them were not in firing condition, but resolution of imagery frequently is not good enough to tell you whether a thing is or isn't really functional. I mean, if it's caught fire or exploded, it's pretty obvious, but you can have intermediate conditions where you can't necessarily tell. If, for example, a fragment goes into a particular black box, that may knock the system out, but you can't see it because the resolution on the imagery is too low.
okay.
If you're looking for something the size of a 22 hole in a missile fuselage that's 1.5 meters in diameter, it gets a little dicey.
Okay, but what I'm really asking you is, you're dialoguing with certain sources that are, I assume, in touch with you on the planet, but they're like anonymous too. They are whistleblowers in essence. They are people that are, maybe some of them still employed in the military or whatever, in intelligence agencies. They're not actually necessarily supposed to be talking to you. Is that correct?
It makes a lot of people unhappy, yes.
So that's what I'm asking.
People smile quietly inside.
Okay, so
Because
what I'm trying to find out is, what's the feedback? Because you've got this sort of loop going on in which you're talking to off-worlders, you're getting their interaction with our military and with incidents that are going on worldwide, really. And then you're also talking to your intelligence sources who are then relaying information to you about our military. And on a certain level, at some point, I'm just wondering if you're getting any feedback from from either source, or if there's anyone coming to you saying, look, you're in dialogue with these so-called ETs that are supposedly doing these, taking part in international incidents that affect our so-called national security, as they love to say it. So is anybody giving you any kind of feedback or anything?
Well, I mean, what I'm hearing from my sources is that, we're very grateful for any and all help at this stage of the game. As I said, we are very overextended. We have very few options on how to deal with this because most of our combat resources are overseas, and that is by design. It is meant to leave us wide open. And there are and have been foreign troops in the United States squirreled away in various places. There are equipment parked full of all kinds of vehicles painted white with UN in blue on them. And this gets into the whole Rex 84 FEMA continuity of government, national emergency scenario, which, we can get into if you want to, but
yeah, well, we should go there. We should definitely go there. But let's go there after we discuss the whole Israeli situation that you were talking about when I interrupted you and brought you back to this whole scenario. There's so much here that we could really spend, just like I said last time, hours and hours going back and forth into these various incidents, but I will move along, and then what we will do is try to go back over certain things and allow people to ask you questions at a certain juncture, all right?
Sounds fine to me.
Okay, and you were very, very patient last time, and so if you get, overtired or exhausted by the situation here, me asking you too many questions or whatever, you just let me know, all right?
I certainly will.
Okay.
But I'm happy to talk as long as anybody's willing to listen. I think people really need to know what's going on. They need to understand just how controlled the mass media is. They need to understand that the military of the United States has been deliberately and systematically ground practically to dirt by endless cycles of wars. The U.S. military is fed up with taking it on the chin for the politicians and the bankers, and Congress has imposed all these personnel cuts, which in turn impact directly on the people in the various military services. Weapons are bought not because they're necessarily needed, but because they make money in the particular congressman or senator's district. Things like that. We're buying a grand total of one oiler in the current naval budget. And if you're going to operate a whole series of groups overseas, you need more than one oiler. But oilers aren't sexy. Oilers aren't, littoral combat ships or nuclear carriers or anything like that. So they don't have much of a constituency, so they don't get bought. So then you wind up with a force that's not very well balanced to actually conduct combat operations. This is what happens when you get politics mixed up in military procurement.
Okay, great. So now what I'd like to do is move to the Israeli situation that you were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I also want to ask you about a news item that has to do with Egypt, because Egypt made a very important announcement recently, and I'm wondering what your contingent, both sides of your contingent have given you feedback on in that regard. But let's start with the Israeli situation. So right when I interrupted
go ahead.
You had started to talk about what it sort of sounded like. There were a bunch of ships that were doing maneuvers, and in the Gulf. Was it in the Gulf?
Yeah, I think you're thinking of the Iranian kamikaze vessels and some other ones.
Okay.
In the Persian Gulf.
Right. Okay.
But if you
So
want to talk about, do you want to go there or do you want to cover Israel?
I want to do both of them, but do Israel first.
Okay, well, here's the situation in a nutshell. Israel has been mobilized now. Oh, geez, it's got to be in excess of a month. Every day that Israel is mobilized for war costs its economy millions and millions and millions of dollars. Okay, so they've been mobilized for a long time. They're still on war foot. They've secured permission from both Saudi Arabia and Iraq to overfly those countries, which means they have a strike corridor into Iran. The Israeli Air Force, when last seen, was in the process of selecting a new chief. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wants a hawk. I can't remember the name of the other guy. Unfortunately, he wants a dove, but Netanyahu is in a position to force his candidate into office, so to speak. The Israelis have been warned specifically by the off-planet contingent not to attack Iran. The U.S. is doing everything it can. Britain has talked to Israel as well. And if you recall the story I told last time about the submarine launched ballistic, ballistic missile submarine, nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine that the Israelis got from the French. And they were warned by the EDs not to take this thing out, and they did. And it met a terrible storm, and that was forced the submarine to surface. The sub was met by a corvette that was coming under attack, an Israeli corvette that was coming under attack by Somali pirates when up knocks this huge, almost 300-foot-long submarine, terrifying the pirates who beat feet for home. The crewman with the skull fracture was evacuated and is presently the only known survivor of the submarine. I was being laughed at, according to my sources in the Pentagon, he's crazy, and all that, openly sniggering and whatnot. And ETs issued another set of warnings, and all of a sudden, the submarine misses one check-in, a second check-in, and pretty soon it's 6 or 7. Next thing you know, it's the considered opinion of people in naval circles that the submarine has been lost. Later on, a Chinese hydrographic vessel reported hearing breaking up noises, which should not have happened because the submarine has something called a crush depth, and the water in that part of the Arabian Sea isn't that deep. But the ETs have said, look, Israel, if you don't stop this, and this thing's carrying 16 ballistic missiles, by the way, nuclear-armed ballistic missiles, not dirty bombs, full-on nukes. If you don't stop, we're going to kill this stuff. We're going to crush it, and we're going to take the missiles out, and we're going to take the reactor. Well, they spent several days hunting for the sub. The Chinese found it, and the entire part of the sub that housed the missile compartment was gone, and there was a gaping hole where the reactor should have been. Israel considers it a war grave, but it doesn't realize that the crew was taken off. The crew are guests of the off-planet contingent.
Right.
And people may just see that submarine again one of these days in some interesting place, possibly even floating about. So that will be an interesting day when that happens. But so that's sort of the background on what Israel went through at the hands of the ETs, because this thing was headed straight into firing range of Iran. They issued warning after warning. They weren't listened to. And so Israel lost the sub. It lost a crew of probably 125, 130 people, all highly trained naval personnel. And the effect of the equivalent loss, if that was in the U.S., would be 1,000 people because of the difference in population sizes.
Okay, so
And it has not been decided whether the crew will be returned, by the way.
I understand you said
So
they were being re-educated, right?
that's my understanding, yes.
Okay,
So
but
Israel is now in a position to strike. It has decided to go to war. Everybody's trying to talk them out of it, but that's not what's happening. And Israel is doing such a good job of scaring its neighbors that Saudi Arabia is trying to buy nukes from China to defend itself. Benjamin Netanyahu has declared he wishes to be the last prime minister of Israel. Now, that statement has enormous significance because what it really means is he intends to preside over Armageddon.
right. Well,
And there's a
they
very
have to
good
set the stage for their game, for Armageddon. I mean, there's no doubt whatsoever they're going to try to do that. Whether they'll succeed is another matter. God, the group that you're dealing with, you believe they're humanoid, is that right?
They are human, yes.
Okay. Does it occur to
Actually,
you?
two groups I'm dealing with.
I'm sorry?
There are two separate and distinct groups I'm dealing with.
Are they friendly towards each other?
They are. They are in absolute agreement as to what needs to be done to liberate Earth, deal with the remaining reptilians and greys, and deal with certain other problems. But the absolute top priority is stopping a war or an engineered disaster from occurring that would cause everything to come on the edge.
Okay, and are you aware that in essence in a sense they are intervening in our affairs in a big way, wouldn't you say?
They are by direct invitation.
By invitation. Whose invitation?
Lots and lots of people on this earth crying out for help, not to mention the planet herself, if you've ever been exposed to the Gaia model.
Okay.
The planet herself has consciousness, is aware,
Yes.
and has a kind of life in her own right. It's not anything the average person would recognize as being alive, but one of the I don't know whether to call it a gift or what, but I'm highly sensitive to the Earth, and I have repeatedly had the Earth tell me before a significant quake came in, I'm about to move, and within 24 hours there was a magnitude 6 or greater quake, and just so the readers know, or listeners know, rather, that's the equivalent of a 1 megaton nuclear detonation. Or
Okay.
a billion tons of TNT being exploded all at once.
Yes, and we talked about that last time. We talked about you being an earth sensitive, and so people can go back and get that from the prior interview.
Right.
But I guess what I'm really asking you is, in terms of the if you will, exopolitical relationship that this group or these two groups are having. They are talking to you. I assume they may or may not be talking to other humans, right?
I can't speak exactly to that. On one case, one group definitely is talking to other humans. The other group appears to be talking only to me. It was explained to me that I was the sole coordinator. I didn't ask for the gig.
Okay, and do you know why they chose to talk to you? Did they tell you?
My understanding is that the combination of my experience in military aerospace, the ability to speak a common, to operate from a common frame of reference on military matters, my ability to explain birth things to them in a way that has meaning to them. And it also gets into past life stuff. Somebody who did a Reiki healing on me found all kinds of evidence of past lives as a warrior, spear thrust in the leg, slashes to the head, cannonball holes through the chest, all kinds of things I never thought about myself. I have always had an affinity for the Roman legions, and I've even run into somebody who apologized for getting me killed because in another life she was my legionary commander. So apparently I got into military analysis as another way of getting a handle on the whole military experience. But just so we're clear, I have never served in the U.S. military or anybody else's military in this lifetime.
Okay.
So
and what about...
Go ahead.
What about the idea that these ETs you're talking to may be time travelers?
Subject hasn't come up, but my understanding is that traveling interdimensionally kind of includes that. I can tell you that military operations on Earth against the New World Order and various other hostile factions have repeatedly been interfered with by timeline issues, dimensional fluxes, and things of that nature. So I would presume they do get into time, and they definitely do have faster than light travel capabilities and things of that nature. You know, when you're talking about really doing that, you're talking about folding space-time and pulling whatever it is to you.
Right.
Calculations have been verified to within 10% by one of the top space propulsion experts in the country, a guy named Froning. His wife gave him a copy of Kinder's book, Faster Than, I believe it's called Faster Than Light, or something like that. And he ran the numbers the Pleiadians had given, I believe it was Billy Meyer, using what's called field effect propulsion, which McDonnell Douglas's version of the Lockheed Skunk Works was analyzing, and the numbers came out within 10%. Once you got clear of the planets, because you don't really want to go into hyperdrive right next to them, because it would do terrible, terrible things to the locals. So basically what you have to do is you have to get out into space a certain distance from a planet, then go into drive, and then come out of drive before you get to where you're going, and then proceed more slowly, because otherwise it causes enormous havoc.
Okay.
So I guess the short answer is yes, they get involved in time travel, but are they time travelers per se? I really don't know.
Well, by default, well, in my opinion, we are as well, but that's another matter. Okay, so I'm wondering if you understand, or what your understanding is as to who the players are in the New World Order versus whoever might not be New World Order. In other words, one of the things that you said last time was there was a real emphasis on making sure that the New World Order went down, right? Mm-hmm. That's what these groups of ETs are supposedly, that's their mission, right?
That's one of their missions.
Okay. So what I want to know is who do you think is New World Order? Who do you and who do they think are New World Order? Are we talking about Bush, Obama, you know, the Illuminati as people understand that, the Chinese Illuminati, you know, in other words, can you classify the New World Order?
We haven't gone into it in any great detail. What they're looking at is who's doing what agenda is furthered by it. There are countries that are not New World Order per se, but have people in critical positions who very much are. For example, in Iran, the one that's always mouthing off to Israel, I think it's the defense minister, is working on behalf of the Rothschilds, and we believe Ahmadinejad is as well. So you can have a country that's not what is. The U.S. itself is, on the verge of going down the hole for the last time. And so you have factions that are pro-NWO, and you have factions in opposition. And then you have situations like we have in the Gulf, where we have allies who we think are on our side, but we still have to watch very closely because they might do something cute. Cute being of the order of shooting up an aircraft carrier, say, with a missile.
Okay, but what I'm asking you is to be a little more specific. In other words, who is the contingent? Because you're dealing with these groups of off-worlders that are supposedly telling you that they have an agenda, and they're going after the people that are trying to, in essence, run the world. So who are those people? If they haven't made it clear, don't you think you should find out?
Well, there's a problem with constantly having to operate in this mode, Carrie. That the priorities are preventing war, preventing major disasters that could trigger the NWO takeover and that nature. And these crises have repeatedly prevented dealing with other things that are very much desired. So imagine a situation where you've got more fires than you've got firefighters. That's kind of where things are right now. So we don't go into epic discussions of the NWO and whatnot. We look at what is being planned, who's involved, what the plan seems to be, and then take action to thwart it. So
okay, but my understanding of these races that you're dealing with is that they don't really lack firepower on the one hand, and they certainly don't lack ability to get intel on the planet wherever they want to get it, and they don't have a lack of numbers. You're acting as though they're limited by their fighting force, or they're limited by their intellectual capacity to handle a certain amount of information in a given time. Aren't you really talking about the limits that you perhaps have put on the situation, and or they have put on you simply because they don't think you can handle it? I mean, in other words, I don't see them as being spread so thin. Why is it that you talk about them as if they are?
Because that's what I've been told. If I told you the size of one of the forces, you'd probably gasp. And it's a lot better now in that particular case than it was even, say, a week ago.
Okay, why are they? Why are these ETs understaffed?
There are limited forces available to deal with a lot of crises. The situation is so bad that the second group to arrive, if you would, has been specifically handed the mission of dealing with Israel because the situation in the Persian Gulf is so fraught and dangerous in and of itself that it requires concentrated attention by the first group, which is much, much larger and has more resources. Okay? War is limited by what you have available, and this is very much a resource-limited situation. There are more and more stellar races, if you would, entering the fray, but the groups that I work with do not have unlimited resources, and there are lots of things going on. There are force fields, for example, being used to hold the planet together in the face of very strong forces that would tend to rip it apart. There are forces dealing with radioactive cleanup from Fukushima and various other things. You know, right now, for example, we've got radioactive snow coming down in the Midwest, or at least that was true a day or so ago. That's got to be dealt with. There was an attempt recently to exploit a quake in the New Madrid fault system, and that forced the abort of planned firing on targets here in the United States are tied directly to efforts to enslave and destroy the American people. Okay. Instead, a ship had to go herring off to stabilize the fault and keep the thing from ripping wide open. I don't know if you know this or not, but the government for some years has had something of the order of 100 million body bags in the vicinity of the New Madrid fault. And there are reports that FEMA is sending people down there for, quote-unquote, a long time in anticipation of what they describe as a quagmire. 100 million people is just under a third of the entire population of the United States. If that fault system comes undone the way it did back in about 1814, it will destroy the major oil, gasoline, and natural gas pipelines that supply most of the rest of the country. There are major electrical high-tension trunks that go through that area. There's a lot of population that's on bottom land that will be flooded. Some of the reports I've seen indicate that it'll turn that part of the country into a very watery area.
Okay, and what have you heard that they, in other words, you're just hearing that they're trying to prevent that, but are you hearing that it's going to be triggered manually?
My understanding was that this particular attempt was kind of a zipper charges, if you would, where when a natural quake occurs, they just kind of pick up on that and set off a succession of charges intended to accelerate the effect. And the charges are very advanced military explosives. So they were barely able to get over there in time to contain that first of the zipper charges, if you would, and then they held the fault system together until another group got there, a third race basically, got there to take over, and that in turn released a warship to resume military tests.
Okay.
So, no, there's what you would like to do, there's what you plan to do, and then there's what you're actually able to do. The great French Field Marshal Ferdinand Foch says no plans to survive contact with the enemy. And we're not just dealing with an enemy, we're dealing with a planet that is undergoing all kinds of upheaval of its own, and people busy trying to exploit that, and the technology's long existed, as you know, to artificially trigger quakes and volcanic eruptions. The Secretary of Defense himself said it some years ago.
Right. Okay.
The terrorists that do it.
So
now imagine that you have a limited force that is trying to simultaneously keep the planet from ripping apart, keep people from starting World War III, deal with all these reactors falling apart, and all the fallout and everything associated with that. And by the way, they managed to build them all on fault lines, which creates a kind of time bomb effect in and of itself. And a lot of corners were cut on these reactors. You've got nations basically rushing to go to war with each other, and they're trying to hold all this together. try to stop the war, trying to deal with, imminent effort. Right now, basically, the government could kick my door in and come get me on the strength of what I've published and everything else under the terms of the Net Defense Authorization Act.
You and me both, my friend. But that's kind of neither here nor there.
I'm still here. I don't know if you heard those beeps or not, but this is how dire the situation is, Carrie. That anybody who stockpiles food, pays cash, owns a gun, is subject to being considered a suspected terrorist under the terms of the NDAA, and can be have his or her domicile broken into by the U.S. military. The person can be hauled off, detained without trial, writ, or warrant, can be extraordinarily rendered to some place and be tortured. That's all in the law that's on the books right now. Okay, that's how close we are to falling right off the cliff. Okay, so part of the priority is dismantling those sorts of structures.
Okay, but there appears to be some kind of line being stepped over in regard to this group and the activities that they're involved in, and whether or not they've got permission to actually do the things they're doing and who they really are working with. Questions like that, which perhaps go even beyond what you've been getting from them. But before we kind of go down that road, let's go back to the Iran situation with the ships that were involved in some kind of maneuvers in which you said basically the ships were then removed.
The Iranians have something like 900 speedboats, plus they have a bunch of craft that were taken up from civilians and armed with explosives and contact fuses, and these things have been out harassing the tankers. And initially they'd come roaring in at high speed and turn away, and more recently they've just kept coming. In response to the threat, the U.S. Navy started putting teams on board the tankers. I'm guessing they're machine gun teams, and they might very well have grenade launchers as well, but I don't know that for a fact. And so what happened was, a while back, I don't know the exact dates, but basically there were a whole bunch of them. The initial report was a baker's dozen, which is 13 that were out swarming around the tankers and trying to attack. And they come charging in, and poof, they're gone.
Okay, whose tankers?
I don't know whose tankers they were, but they were tankers coming into the Strait of Hormuz to pick up Iranian oil, and maybe from some other countries as well. So internationally flagged tankers, not U.S. naval vessels or anything. But there are, 4 carrier battle groups in the area. There are foreign warships. There's 3 Israeli submarines, and I don't remember how many Iranian subs down there. There's a lot of stuff there. But basically what happened was the off-planet contingent decided it didn't want a tanker hit, so it disappeared. A grand total of what's now known to be 40 vessels in broad daylight, in plain sight of members of the media, to include major networks and print media. And,
okay, but
the word I got from somebody with contacts is that the story was completely suppressed. The people their press credentials were threatened. These are like embedded reporters during the Gulf War. And their lives were threatened as well. So this is how you keep a real big deal of a story from appearing. And in that same incident, and the latest and newest and quietest Iranian sub abruptly vanished off the displays of the U.S. subs tracking it, and there was a great inrushing of water heard, like what you'd expect when something was taken out of the water. So the Iranians were out a sub, as well as 40 vessels of various size, and according to the off-planet contingent, they found short and medium-range cruise missiles on them, medium and large caliber guns, advanced communication systems, shoulder-launched surface-to-air missiles, heavy machine guns, things like that. And these things just vanished. There were merchant ship crews that saw it. There were naval crews that saw it. There were press and television reporters who saw it. There was a whole flurry of tweets which have mysteriously disappeared, but people did see that, did talk about it. And so now the whole thing's gagged, and what they were told was the reason you're not allowed to report this story is we don't want any distraction from, the whole thing with the war in the Gulf. Okay, that would be a real distraction if it became generally known that 40 vessels disappeared in broad daylight right in the middle of their kamikaze runs on the tankers. Or some of them were screening the actual Strait of Hormuz against foreign forces. Okay, so that's the off-planet contingent work really showing its hand.
Okay, and this happened exactly when?
I'd have to go back and check, and I'm not...
Okay, well, it had to happen
last week, I think. I honestly don't remember, Carrie. There's been so many things happening lately, I can't even keep up with them.
Okay, but was it since we talked last?
Pardon?
Was it since we last talked?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so it's in the last week.
Yeah, I'd say so. It's just my sense of time is bad, and I've been working some crazy hours trying to keep up with things.
I can appreciate.
So my sense of time is off.
Okay, I can appreciate that. So, at this moment,
within the last week, and this has been confirmed to me not only by my regular contacts, but additional contacts that I did not have before. This has also been confirmed to me by the off-planet contingent in detail. In fact, the rundown of what was found on the vessels taken is from the off-planet.
okay, but were you able to go back and check with your ground sources as well? In other words, are you going back and forth between the two on a regular basis?
Yes. Yes. One tells me something, and I have the other one check, and vice versa.
Okay.
It's a truly unusual position to be in, let me tell you.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's assume this is true, all right?
Okay.
What do you think that the New World Order is thinking about these events and your position within them?
Could you ask that question a different way? Because
Well, is anyone knocking on your door? Is anyone knocking on your door? Are you being approached? Anything?
No one's knocking on my door, no. There's a lot of whistling in the dark going on at the Pentagon and within the intelligence community, I would say.
Okay, do you feel that they basically think that this is so outrageous that no one will believe it, so they figure they'll let you alone?
Well, there was a time when there was a lot of talk within the intelligence community about what they call lancing the boil, and that's a euphemism for killing somebody who annoys them. Okay, I have people watching my back. There are Pearl Harbor files, that is to say, information that's stored away that will be released if anything happens to me. And I'm also being watched by the top side of the contingent, too. One of their people got followed too closely by a black helicopter, and a bolt came out of the blue, blew the helicopter to pieces. and the debris was sucked back up into the portal, and that was the end of that. And I've been told that if anybody comes within 100 feet of me with hostile intent, something very similar may happen. So,
Okay.
but I have been threatened through the back channel repeatedly. I've been told there's a target on my back. I have been on a whole string of watch lists. I couldn't tell you right now whether I could even fly because of the watch list situation.
Okay. So
I have really, really annoyed a lot of people in the intelligence community. On the other hand, the latest word is, and this is probably very convenient for them, they are now taking the position that I'm paranoid, delusional, and no threat. Well, they'll probably say that until the next time something major happens, like a submarine that it was warned was going to be sunk is sunk, or a bomber is snatched out of thin air, which has happened as we covered last time, or something else happens. But that's where the situation stands right now. But the
okay.
intelligence community is very highly aware of it. And as I said, some people are very unhappy with me, and there are others that just go around smiling quietly inside. Because they're sick of the way things are and have been, and they don't like the way the country is going. And you have groups like the Oath Keepers, for example, and the White Hats, and things like that, people who are determined to do something. This is a last stand for representative government, really.
I have another question here. Now I'm going to start admitting questions from the audience since we've been going for a while here, if you don't mind.
Yep. Not a problem.
Great. A person is asking whether or not there is anything special about the Philippines from the viewpoint of this group in terms of the world situation.
The only thing I've heard about the Philippines has to do with large quantities of gold there and in the vicinity. That's the only thing I've heard about the Philippines.
Okay. Have you heard anything special about that in regard to the rest, to what it means for the planet?
No, not really. I think something was said about keeping it away from somebody, but I don't remember the details right now. Sorry.
Okay. Well, if you hear anything in that regard, do let me know.
Mm-hmm.
I have, all right, I'm going to try to grab some of these questions. Somebody's asking, what about the written threats on your blog? Does that make any sense? That
I I was attacked by an apparent disinformation agent fairly early in the game when I was writing about YU-55 and the efforts to intercept it and things like that. I'm not quite sure what's meant by the written threats on the blog. To get some clarification on that, I'll try to answer it, but that's not enough to work from, really.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. It's
saying I'm making the threats, or what is meant by the question?
Says something about written threats from the ETED to the New World Order. That was on your blog 2 days ago.
Oh, well, I mean, they've warned repeatedly that there's going to be nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, that they will strike wherever they go, that there is nothing that can be hidden from them, no information that can't be accessed if they really want to. They've shown repeatedly they can penetrate the most highly secured areas in the country at will.
Okay, are you
the last thing.
Are you in touch with Benjamin Fulford?
I am not. I know of him.
Okay, and do you know whether the groups that you're talking to have any involvement with him and the well, I guess the Chinese secret societies, the Japanese secret societies?
None that I'm aware of. Subjects never come up. They're far too busy dealing with what they're dealing with, which is very, very narrow. People go, why aren't they doing this and why aren't they doing that? Because there's only so many of them, so many resources, and lots of problems, which keep derailing the other efforts.
Okay, and have you told me what planet or what solar system, system they're from? Galaxy, whatever?
No, I haven't, and I'm not going to, not because I wish to be annoying, but because there's a full-blown war raging topside, in addition to everything that's going on here, and giving out order of battle data in the middle of a war is a really bad idea. So it's an operational security matter. I'd love to share the information, but I have instructions not to.
I see. That's interesting.
It reveals, if you know that a certain contingent is here, then certain kinds of weapons are available, certain vulnerabilities come with that. I mean, it's that kind of thing. So I'm not going to discuss where they're from at all.
Okay. Well, are they, you say they're humanoid, are they indeed from off-planet?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
Okay.
They are from other star systems. I can say that much without getting into trouble.
Okay. And they are at war with the reptilians and the Greys, you've said.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's true.
Okay. How about
Dracos?
Okay, and what about the Nordics? The so-called Nordics from Orion.
I think there's so many players to keep track of. I believe I've heard them referred to as the Orionites. Okay, what was it? There's a description of some of this. It's on galacticdiplomacy.com. I think there's a section devoted to the ETED races of both polarities, if you would, and some background on them, and some of them are pretending to be other things. I don't remember the details right now, but I have heard that the Orionites attacked the bases we have on Mars and killed or enslaved everybody there. I don't know if that answers that particular question or not. I have trouble keeping track of the players, and the dynamism of the whole situation is very difficult to stay on top of.
Last time we talked, I asked you a number of things about off-planet matters, including questions about the Space Command, etc. You said you were going to be looking into all of that. Have you looked into any of these, the background behind some of the questions I asked you last time? Have you gotten expanded knowledge in any of these areas that you'd like to share?
Regarding Space Command, that's something I'm working on putting all the pieces together, and when I have the pieces together, and there are more arriving all the time, then I will put out a post on it. I will say that there is something answering that description. I know what it's specifically called. I have a pretty good idea how big it is. I know what kind of weapons it has to a first order, at least. The propulsion and things like that, but I'd prefer to put it out in an organized, coherent form, especially since I'm learning who the opposition is, and that will be quite shocking to people when I reveal it. But
Who the, I'm
not
sorry,
ready
could you
yet
stop
for
right
that.
there? Sorry. Who the opposition to what is?
The force to which you alluded, what you call Space Command. I presume by that you're referring to something that belongs to the U.S. Is that what you're
Yes.
referring to?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, there is a force out there we are fighting, actually several from what I can tell. And so I'm still processing information and trying to put together the intelligence mosaic, as they call it, put the pieces of the puzzle together into a coherent picture. And I've got quite a ways to go yet on that. But I will say that there is such a force. I know what it's called. I know roughly how it's equipped and things like that, but I got a long way to go.
Okay, what about the notion that there may be a race of beings taking gold off planet on a regular basis as we speak?
I haven't heard anything about that. The closest thing to that I've heard was the stories of the Anunnaki taking gold off Earth a long time ago, supposedly to stabilize the atmosphere on their home planet. But I haven't heard anything about gold being taken off the planet by any ET group.
Okay. What about the notion that there might be a group running Earth that are actually not from this dimension?
I'm familiar with that notion. I've actually read accounts of high-level elite conferences where I believe it was the last 2 seats and the most high-ranking seats were reserved for off-planet reptilians.
Okay.
So I have heard that notion expressed. I've seen it written out.
But have you checked with your sources on either side?
Well, in matters relating to the existence of the reptoids, if you would, these are the enemies of the groups that I work with, of the off-planet groups that I work with, for one. Their existence has been confirmed by my terrestrial sources, that they've been pretty much crushed on Earth has been confirmed by my terrestrial sources, and also off-planet sources. Their eggs are exploding in their crashes, I believe is the word.
They're doing what?
The eggs of the reptoids are exploding. The conditions for their survival have deteriorated to the point where the eggs aren't even viable anymore. The race is doomed. That doesn't mean there aren't still some groups of them on the planet. They're being systematically hunted down and destroyed. The orders are kill on sight for either reptoids or greys.
Okay, what about the state of affairs in Dulce?
It is my understanding that Dulce has been attacked at least once by the off-planet contingent, but I do not have ground confirmation on that. They are very much aware of it and similar facilities and will deal with them. They find them absolutely abhorrent and repellent.
Okay.
Their sensibilities of epic proportions. They know full well what's going on in there, and they are not happy with it even remotely. And they have the ability to see into the earth. They have all kinds of surveillance capabilities that the terrestrial agencies could only dream of having. Frequently, I have a problem just getting my head around some of their capabilities. To go back to Israel, for example, they could, if they wanted to, in a matter of seconds, basically put Israel back to where it was in the 1920s, to include destroying every machine tool in the country.
Okay. Have they told you what the facility in the Negev desert is used for?
No, we've had no discussion of any facility in the Negev, unless Dimona is in the Negev. I can't remember right now where Dimona is. They went after the nuclear weapon production part of Dimona, as revealed by Mordecai Benunu, and they filled it in with some sort of silicon compound, and it's semi-transparent and apparently pretty hard, and that was the end of the Israeli nuclear production there. They have also taken all of the Israeli ballistic missiles, targeted them on Israel, and locked Israel out of both reprogramming the missiles, and they've completely disabled the ability to launch them. So the Israeli ballistic missile force has been taken out, and some 40 nuclear weapons have been taken off nuclear strike aircraft located in underground hangars, much like some of the doomsday bombers have been taken out of various U.S. Air Force Base underground hangars.
Okay.
That's the information I have.
Did you hear about the announcement made by Egypt?
No. I've been frantically busy. What was the announcement?
Something to the effect that they would attack Israel and the U.S. sometime in the near future?
No, I have not heard that.
Okay. Well, maybe next time we talk, you can look into that and get back to us on that.
Yeah, well, you better believe I'm going to be checking on that. Because, no, I had not heard anything like that. But as I say, it has been, a greater alarm fire in terms of things going on, and lots of them at once.
All right. Someone is asking you if you've been told about the next big event, is how they write it.
No specific discussion of that. But something they were talking about, like December 21st, 2012, I don't really quite understand the question.
Okay. Have you been told anything about chemtrails?
Yes. Well, several things from several different places. Gaia, Mother Earth, is saying they're basically choking her to death. The chemtrails are very definitely the whole chemtrail system, if you would, is the object of considerable attention by the off-planet forces. Some of that apparently resides in the higher dimension, so just dealing with things at Earth level doesn't solve the problem. It simply gets replaced and you move on. And there seems to be an air of, I would call it desperation. People are reporting incredibly heavy levels of chemtrailing in various places, and my sense of it is that it is a effort to rush their plan to completion before they can't do anything anymore. They're trying to reach a tipping point, in other words, where things have been altered so much that it can't be reversed. It's as I understand it, a variety of terraform, and I think you said something about that when last we talked, to create
That's correct.
an environment that is fundamentally hostile to life as we know it and super favorable to the reptoids, the Greys, the Dracos, and so forth.
Yes.
And then you've also got the connection to Morgellon disease, where metal fibers are coming up out of people's skin. It's horrifically painful. And I've heard some indications that nanotechnology is involved, and I've heard that part of the plan is to turn us into sort of kind of like Borg in a way, I guess would be the closest analogy the audience at large could relate to. Sort of hybrid people-machines, which is admittedly a lot to get one's head around, but one of my highly cleared ground contacts was talking about the Morgellons disease, and it was described as when one of these metal fibers, the result of the chemtrailing, comes through it, and it's like having a pin driven out of your body point first. You know, if you can imagine lots and lots of those coming out. It sounds pretty horrible to me, and I've seen estimates that something in excess of 1 million people are affected by this condition. They're trying to fundamentally alter the atmosphere, alter the conditions of the environment, poison the environment for life forms like us, and make it a paradise for them. And it's got to be stopped, and believe me, it's on the list of things to do, along with stopping the wars and doing all the other things. It's, you know, it is a really, really tough priority problem. You know, what do you deal with first when you've only got so many resources?
Okay,
we're
but
not talking about. Go ahead.
well, you know, assuming this is all going on as you say it is, and particularly this way, why aren't they working with more aspects of the military? For example, the good guys, if you will.
I don't know why things are the way they are. I know only they are the way they are. They know what they're doing. They know why they're here. They've done it on other planets. There are, as I understand it, 20-plus planets in the same boat. But Earth is win here or lose everything. Because if Earth falls, this becomes a fabulous base to destroy the rest of creation. Anybody with a strong stomach is welcome to visit my site, go to the FAQ, and read what's really happening. But there's a big warning there, and I put it there on purpose, because if you can't handle reality, you really don't want to read that. And you should stay away from sharp objects and guns and high places and all that. And I'm not kidding. It may sound funny, but it's no joke. The situation is dire, and it's dire on a whole bunch of levels.
Yes, I appreciate that. Okay, I think that I asked you this before. I am skimming these questions coming my way here. So if you've already answered it last time, you know, and I don't remember, did you address, or are you aware of anything, or have you discussed with your off-planet contingent or your sources on planet the notion of December 21st, 2012 and or converging timelines?
A little bit on December 21st, 2012. They laughed. The off-planet contingent just laughs. They think we're nuts.
They laugh because they don't think anything is happening on planet Earth, or because that date is just a date?
It's just a date. The calendar rolls over as far as the Mayan calendar rolls over as far as they're concerned. The new cycle begins. They don't expect the world to end. They think that this is the best excuse ever for selling books and DVDs and things of that nature. I mean, they just snort and giggle and all that.
Okay, who snorts and giggles? The ones off planet or the ones on?
Off.
Both?
I've only talked to the second group about this particular matter.
The contacts on planet?
No. two races that I work with off planet. The more recent of Leoride is the one that I talked to about December 21st, 2012, and they purported into the world and all that.
Okay, and what about
they
the?
just laugh.
Okay, and so they have a sense of humor, is what you're also
Oh,
saying.
definitely.
That's good because they're going to need it.
Right, laughing so hard they fall out of their chairs or whatever they sit on.
Okay, what about?
Occasionally I get a glimpse of something too. Mostly it's just like talking to you this way with no visuals, but occasionally I get a glimpse of something, and I actually saw one fall out of what looked like a chair, so just fell over backwards in the chair from laughing so hard.
Okay, what about the notion of converging timelines? Have they talked to you about that?
Well, not specifically converging timelines, but the whole question of timelines is a big deal. And there are, the reptoids, for example, have the ability to manipulate timelines. And they're not the only ones. We've had instances where weapon firing looked really good from their end and nothing showed up on our end because it wound up on a different timeline. Or it got distorted by a dimensional thing, or the chemtrail disrupted the beam. There all kinds of crazy things happen. So, it's gotten to the point where it's like, okay, I have a report, an attack was made, now, let me see what my ground sources have to say about that. Is such and such still standing? Get into situations like that, and sometimes the target's gone away, and sometimes it hasn't, and sometimes weapons malfunction. Anytime you're dealing with technology, there are problems. But when you're dealing with operating from multiple dimensions above through all kinds of fluxes in the timeline and dimensional shifts and rifts and things like that, the problem becomes really complicated. And sometimes you have to work it iteratively until you finally get the results you want. The first strike on the missiles from the off-planet contingent was a test shot, basically. So it took some time to get things sorted out.
Okay, some people are asking why they don't just shoot down the planes that are spreading chemtrails.
They may very well, at some point. This is very tricky. What they try to do is protect human life wherever possible. And if they have to do something in such a way that it kills people, they try to kill as few as possible. They've even went so far as to throw up force walls around the troops protecting the second batch of missile launchers, so that when the missile launchers exploded and all the rocket fuel and everything else came flying at the troops and would otherwise have cut them to pieces, it hit the force wall and fell harmlessly. It scared the living daylights out of the troops, to put it mildly, but they were basically fine, whereas they would have been, human torches or worse otherwise.
Okay,
so,
well, why don't I mean, basically they sound like they're basically a kind of a CIA in the way they operate. Why don't they just start taking out leaders of countries if they're willing to interfere to such a degree as you're talking about? What's stopping them from just?
There have been discussions about doing that. They have launched certain harassment programs on people where, you get a certain tune played over and over again all day everywhere you go. They can send messages that way. They can, if they want to, they can make the sky talk. They can take over the airwaves if they want to. There are lots of things, but it's a question of what gets the job done with the least expenditure of time and energy? And that is not always clear. And, that's where having someone like me is helpful, because they know an awful lot, and they have databases that are just inconceivable. They go back enormous periods of time. But that doesn't necessarily mean they understand the ins and outs of certain things that happen on Earth and interactions and things of that nature. So you could say that frequently I act as an interpreter and an explainer of things. And, it's a matter of trying, in the case of Israel, you're dealing with somebody who's adamantly determined to have a war. So the question is, how do you stop the war in the best possible way without hurting anybody, if possible?
Okay, but they're not really telling you that there is a group of ETs behind Israel. Are they not telling you of that?
I have not been told that, no.
Okay, so they're actually limiting the amount that you know, and you've also limited yourself in the sense that on the number of questions you ask them, I assume.
Well, they're very, very busy. I get the equivalent of a ringing phone. It's a pressure in my ear, and that's when they want to talk to me, and when I want to talk to them, I have my ways of connecting with them. But one gets the impression of they're being frantically busy much of the time. There's so many things going on that have to be watched and assessed and responded to, sometimes very, very little time, like the New Madrid Fault thing I talked about earlier. If they hadn't gotten on that right away, we might be missing a significant part of the middle of the country. That's just the reality of it. If something isn't done timely in some other part of the world, you may find World War III occurring. China and Russia have both publicly said now, and put the U.S. on notice, that if Iran is attacked, they will wade in on the side of Iran. Well, if that isn't the potential for World War III, I don't know what is. And here you've got our ostensible ally, who is simultaneously robbing us blind on the technology and military hardware front and selling it to the Chinese, determined to go to war in order so that the Prime Minister can be the last Prime Minister of Israel. It's a very, very crazy, dangerous situation.
Okay, well, I certainly agree with that, but what I'm very curious about is the motivations of these groups that you're working with.
The motivations of the groups are the liberation of the planet from the infestation that's held the planet and people enthralled for truly millions of years, even though most people don't. The historical records don't go back that far, if you would. But
okay, what happened to having humans take care of their own stuff?
The human, well, they are dealing with forces that have technologies that are so far beyond most people's comprehension as to, I wouldn't want to be a science fiction writer, let's put it that way. I don't know what you would write about. You're talking about groups that have faster than light travel. You're talking about groups that have beam weapons. You're talking about groups that have
yes, that's a given.
And transporter units and all that stuff. Okay? We are utterly outclassed when it comes to that. And we sort of cooked our own goose back in '54 when we were given a choice. Even though there was already a very substantial negative ET presence, if you would. We met with two different contingents Eisenhower did at what's now Edwards Air Force Base. And one group was offering fabulous weapons and all this other stuff, and the other group was saying, well, we'll do all these wonderful things for you if you dump your nuclear weapons, if you denuclearize. The ones I work with are out of that group, okay, and that offer is still on the table. All kinds of fantastic things can come our way if we denuclearize. Part of the reason for the concern about the nuclear weapon is it was explained to me that a nuclear weapon rips a hole in the fabric of time when it detonates. And there was a picture that appeared on the cover of Life magazine back during, I guess, the Cold War from one of the atomic tests. And right in the middle of the mushroom clouds, you could see a rip right through it, through which you could see the stars. So when we set off a nuke, it rips through all these parallel worlds and other dimensions and things like that, and really upsets the neighbors. So that's why
Yes.
our nuclear tests have attracted so much attention. If you look at the history of the UFOs and whatnot. When
Right.
we start
Well, I
talking
mean,
to-
John, no, I appreciate that. It's just that that's common knowledge in the group that you're talking to here. So,
Right.
but to move a little further along that road, let me ask you some of the questions that are still coming by fast and furious in the chat. Are you have you been given any information about Obama by these groups?
The opinion is that he's a clone.
A
Or
clone
a-
of himself?
Yeah, you know, they refer to them as synthetics in the U.S.
Oh, you mean like an android?
A kind of biological robot, for want of a better term. This is a very common situation for world leaders. And it's also complicated things for the off-planet contingent. Because, for example, when they went after the international bankers, they picked people up where they should have been and whatnot. And it wasn't until they got them on the ships that they found out they didn't have what they thought they had. They picked up clones. There's a fair amount of material on my site about some of this stuff.
Okay.
But, you know, the clones have a finite life and then they're replaced. But basically, the only way you can get out of that vicious cycle, if you would, is that if the supposed person is publicly killed, as in the case of the CIA officials who were found dangling from the trees outside of CIA headquarters, for example. You know, you can't replace them with clones. But if somebody is, say, shot and they rush them off, then, you know, if the person's alive, then you can replace them with a clone, and it's like, well, no, the report of the assassination was wrong, you know, things like that. It's a very weird world.
Okay. Have they talked to you about any kind of races of robots?
No, haven't heard anything about races of robots, no.
Okay.
Not from them. I have heard indications there's something like the Borg out there. There definitely, according to what I've heard, is a thing that could be deemed a Borg ship. It was described to me as a gigantic craft possessed of enormously powerful weaponry, which fortunately isn't very long range, from which a whole series of machine intelligences broadcast these avatars, Galactic Federation, the Y, Count, Saint Germain, and a bunch of others I listed on my FAQ. that people think they're communicating with something that's sentient and all wonderful, and what they're dealing with is a gigantic disinformation campaign.
Right. A program. Okay. Well, what about the notion of nanotechnology and AI on the planet? Have they talked to you about that?
I have heard about nanites and things like that. No extensive discussion, because again, we tend to be very, very focused on a handful of topics, and I know it must frustrate the audience no end. It frustrates the people who comment on my site. So, what about this? What about this? What about this? And I keep having to repeat. Finite resources, lots of problems. Stay on task. Because if you don't, the whole thing goes to pieces.
Okay, but there are some things that are more threatening than you perhaps are either aware of, or and that they may be more crucial than even some of these sort of more materialistic endeavors. In other words, plans that have to do with I had a recent live stream regarding Skynet and these group of low Earth orbiting satellites that are run by AI that indeed could have the potential to turn on humans. This is not
that's always
superficial.
The downside of really smart technology, and this has long been the subject of science fiction writers, the dangers of when machine intelligence becomes self-aware. See, for example, Colossus, the Orbit projects, the HAL 9000 deciding that, this human's not doing what I want it to do, so I'm going to space it.
Right.
Things like that. I haven't seen that particular show, I regret to say, but I am certainly aware of the basic concepts involved, and yes, that's a real issue.
Okay.
The off-planet contingent has been eliminating a whole bunch of satellites, including orbital mind control satellites, and there are some signs that that's having some effect on people as they start to get their mind back, rather than having them being jammed and altered in terms of how they function and things like that.
Well, along those lines, have they talked about taking out the tower on the moon?
I haven't heard about that tower, but there are a lot of other towers that are coming down having to do with mind control. I gather you're implying that there's some sort of major mind control tower on the moon. Is that a correct inference?
Yes, that's correct.
I will look into it, but I haven't heard anything about it. Maybe somebody else is dealing with it. I don't even know how many races are involved. I'm now directly aware of 4 that are doing good things, one of which has been recently freed from thraldom, if you would. But I don't know how many total are out there or what they're doing. I work with 2 and primarily with 1.
Okay.
And occasionally I get into coordination problems. I got spanked recently because of something I said. But it was an innocent mistake, and it was just a matter of one contingent was doing something, didn't tell the other, and the other contingent was doing something similar, and I wrote about it. Oops.
Okay. Can you be any more specific about that?
No, I shouldn't, actually. It just had to do with a class of operations against a certain set of targets, and apparently it was felt that I'd compromised an operation because of something I said, but I didn't know the ones that were conducting the operation, and I wasn't told not to say anything. So how can you know not to say anything when you haven't been told not to? If that made any sense.
Sure.
Yeah, I wish I could be more specific, but it would only make the original breach worse.
Okay.
You know, here's the reality, Carrie. I have to constantly be concerned with not revealing things I shouldn't from both the ground side of the equation and the off-planet side. I have to be careful not to compromise our operations. I have to make sure I don't say something that reveals something that shouldn't be revealed. And it's a real tightrope walking act at times.
I can appreciate that. Okay, someone is asking about the Stargate, and off of Yemen. Are you aware of that?
My understanding is there is what I have heard called a Seagate by
Right.
one of the off-planet contingents. I have seen assertions that there's a lot of pirate activity down there, which is really New World Order type stuff, intended to keep others away from the Seagate.
Mm-hmm.
As my understanding, there are multiple Stargates, and something to do with one in Iraq, and that was the real reason for the war being fought there. And I think there are some in Iran, if my memory is working correctly. And that's also a factor in this desire to invade. So I'm aware of it, and there are other Stargates out there that are used to enter the system, and there are security cordons that have and will do things like intercept hostile forces coming through a Stargate, and they aim to kill them by a certain point, and there are forces in place that will, for example, zap a gray ship coming out of the atmosphere of Earth to keep it from getting away. As I said, there's a war on.
Yes. Okay. All right. Let me see. Do you know anything about the Great Pyramid and its potential to protect the planet, to act as a balancing device, as well as many other capabilities that it has? Have they focused on that at all, moving into this time?
We haven't really talked much about that. We talked a little bit about how the pyramids were made. I'm loosely familiar with Joseph Farrell's work on the Giza Death Star. The Giza Death Star destroyed. The argument that they created things like that, but and I know that measurements have been taken atop the Great Pyramid and in other places that clearly indicate they're emitting energy. There's one in Serbia that's been found that really noticed a lot of energy coming out of. But we haven't really got, again, very task focused.
Okay, what about the notion of what are stargates that will be used as ascension gates?
Run that by me again?
Have they talked to you about anything remotely related to ascension of humanity into higher dimensions, moving of the earth into a higher dimension, moving of individuals, groups, etc., through stargates into higher dimensions? Anything on that level?
There's been some talk of the transition of Earth to a higher plane and changes like that, but not directly associated with the stargates. My understanding is you can put anything you want through a stargate as long as you control the stargate. if the Stargate's controlled, you can't get through it.
Okay, have they talked to you about the war to control the stargates on planet Earth?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. And but that's about it. Not much.
Okay.
You know, I hate to keep saying it, but it's the same basic answer as before. They've got very, very narrow set of priorities, and that's what primarily gets discussed.
Is it possible that they only discuss with you what they think that you are able to focus on?
That's possible. I mean, at other times I've talked to some of the, shall we say, I call it the ground contingent. There are people of the ET groups who are here in human embodiment. And, you know, we have discussions about various things at times, but again, primarily it's focused on the mission at hand.
Okay, and what about CERN? Do they see a threat in what they're doing over at CERN?
No discussion whatsoever on that so far. If I get a chance, I'll bring it up, but we haven't talked about it at all. There are lots of things we haven't talked about.
Okay, what about the notion that they're moving the capital of the U.S. to Denver?
Moving to what?
The capital of the U.S., in other words...
Capital. I haven't heard anything about that. I have heard the British royal family bought extensive tracts of land in the Denver area and Colorado, probably in anticipation of earth changes.
Okay, have they told you about plans for that the Illuminati are making to move to places like Paraguay and Australia?
Good. I'm aware of those things, and there has been a specific discussion regarding the quakes of Christchurch, New Zealand, as being punishment for the New Zealand government refusing to let the what one person refers to as the PTW, the powers that were, from you know, building refuges for themselves there. So the punishment was a series of quakes against Christchurch. And I'm well aware of the giant estancias that, for example, the Bush family has in Paraguay, where there's no extradition treaty. But as I said before, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. They can come get them anytime.
I understand. Okay. And lastly, you know, and I am going to wrap this up. We've been going for a while at this point, but perhaps we'll just see if there's a couple last-minute questions. In terms of the financial situation in the world and in the U.S., are they aware of it, and are you hearing anything from either your sources on planet or off planet as far as, well, at great minimum, basically the dollar being devalued down to zero and a one world currency, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, I know that's what the NWO would like to do, but
well, they can't. It's not like they can take. It's not like they can take a ship and bring it into another dimension. In other words, the financial system is kind of a different needs a different approach. So, is this group working in that regard, or do they even deal with that?
Other groups are working in that regard. The Universities of Evolution have sent 30 people to Earth specifically to begin to address the banking situation and sort it out. And whether that's tied to this epic list of resignations and people retiring for quote-unquote health reasons or family reasons. It's all over the internet, all over my site, all over a lot of places. I couldn't say, but I have been told by people very well tied into the first contingent that that is what has happened, and there is, I believe at this point, hope that they will be able to sort it out. Earlier there was a lot of oscillating between, we think we can fix it and it's hopeless. Now, we talked about the hyperdimensional Gordian knot. Well, they think now they can fix it, but I don't know the details, and, macroeconomics is not my thing.
Okay. All right. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to address or tell people about?
Yeah, I have been getting increasing reports and concerns that, I may be dealing with satanic influences here, that I may think I'm dealing with something that I'm really not. That's one part of it, and the other part of it is, and I saw this, it was on your blog actually, somebody was opining that in that person's view that the EPVDs that I work with were of the negative polarity because they were willing to use weaponry rather than shower the people with love and all this other stuff. And what needs to be said here, and emphatically so, is that they're cutting out a cancer. It's not pretty, it's ugly, it's messy. They're doing everything they can to limit damage and all that, but this is a war, and there are casualties in war. And things are being done on behalf of humankind that the humans simply cannot do for themselves. They just don't have the technology, they don't have the horsepower, they don't have, in some cases, they don't have the information. They haven't fought some of these species for hundreds of years like some of the groups have. They're just completely outclassed in every way, and you can be sure that the nasty weapons that were provided to the humans were not the best available. Just like countries that export weapons don't typically export their frontline equipment. It's always an export version that doesn't have all the bells and whistles. So you're dealing with a problem that ordinary humans cannot really handle. They're not set up for it. You're dealing with races that are effectively immortal. And on it goes. So other planets were helped. They in turn are helping. Various systems have been liberated, but this is an all-out for survival. And if you think that it's, showering flowers on the reptoids is going to get them off the planet, you are sorely delusional. And as far as the satanic influences, I've done everything I can to control against anything of that sort of polarity penetrating the operation, if you would. There are negative influences out there, as I indicated. There are demons. There are other things out there. And you just have to be aware and exercise discernment and pay attention to what's going on. Pay attention to what's being said. Pay attention to how it's being said. And above all, pay attention to your gut and your intuition. If it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't.
Let me ask you one last thing, because that I also talked about on my blog. Have you ever read Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke?
Several times.
Do you understand what happens when an outside group comes in and tries to force peace on humanity?
I know what can happen, yeah. I also am familiar with the work of Margaret Mead on when a higher civilization encounters a less developed one, as in the cargo cults of the South Pacific as a result of the U.S. military presence there during World War II. And I'm familiar with that. You know,
Okay, they're not exactly the same thing, though.
Pardon?
Margaret Mead and her take on, which is the rationale of the Illuminati for all sorts of things, is not the same thing as what Arthur C. Clarke was really talking about.
No, he talked about how, if I remember the book correctly, this group came along and it started grooming the children, and the children, in a sense, ascended. They became this new life form, and they left their earthly families behind, and deprived of their reason for being. There were epidemics of suicide and things like that among the Karens or Earthlings or whatever you want to call them. As I recall, the beings were winged and
Are you saying they put the fuel in them in this jungle location?
yes, yes, there were special fueling vehicles to transport the hydrazine and the fuming red nitric acid. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and was
it's
it
a very tricky process?
okay? And during the fueling of these, there were 40 of them. Is that correct?
Total of 40 missiles and 20 launchers. Yes.
Okay, and are the launchers? Is this the kind of thing you could see if you fly over?
Yes.
Okay.
That's how we knew how many there were.
Okay.
Once we were alerted to the presence of the missiles, we started all kinds of overhead reconnaissance.
And this is the human contingent, right?
Yes. Well, believe me, the upstairs contingent was also keeping an eye on things.
Right.
And
Okay.
working out the rather tricky problem of firing a weapon interdimensionally, if you would. It's, firing from outer space is tricky enough. Firing down through successive dimensions is even more exciting. And so there were some test firings, and sometimes things worked well and other times they didn't. But they did a good job in the end on the missiles, and the missiles are gone. But one of the important points that I would like the listeners to take away from this is that we had essentially a second Cuban Missile Crisis, and it was all but completely kept out of the mainstream media.
Yes.
There were a few brief snippets here and there, and the government just squashed the story.
Okay, when you say there, okay, stop right there. I'm sorry, John, I'm going to have to keep stopping you because, this is all maybe very simple to you, but it's not going to be simple to me, and it's not simple to my listeners. And so at this point, you said there were a few snippets. I assume you mean out in the press about this incident. What, can you be more specific? Do you know where in the press?
No, I do not. All I heard was that there were a few little pieces here and there, and after that, the government clamped down across the board on it.
Okay.
And the story never grew legs, as they say.
I see. Okay, now the missiles are sitting in the jungle, At that point, you started talking about the cartel, and what it sounded like is moving things across the border. So how did we jump from this point to the point where you were describing about the cartel and all of that?
Okay. Hugo Chavez expected tribute or a certain amount of money to be paid to him by the drug cartel.
For the
I'm
missiles?
not going to get my force. No. In order to transport drugs through Venezuela, he expected money to be paid to him.
And how does that? Why does that come up when we're talking about the missile crisis?
Because when he didn't get the tribute that he felt he was owed, he unwisely threatened to drop some of these missiles on the main transit route that runs through Mexico that the cartel uses. At this point, the cartel got
I'm
really
sorry. This sounds really mad. And you know, I'm not criticizing you. I'm just trying to think. I just want to understand how this military leader would take these missiles. What is their radius?
Found was that after working some bugs out of their systems, the extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional group conducting a firing from above, a test firing, took out 7 of the remaining 10 and a bunch of the reserve missiles, theoretically leaving 3 and a couple of refires, which were later observed to be put on crude launchers. Next time reconnaissance saw it, all of a sudden there's 5 missiles on 5 tells, which wasn't good. But it later turned out that the 2 of the tells had been badly scorched and beaten up before in the earlier attack, and had been cleverly repainted to make it look like he had more than he really did, and those were subsequently destroyed. So that particular missile threat is gone. I can tell you that as a result of some of that, it was information was obtained which indicated through several open sources that a large defense complex was being put in on the Paraguana Peninsula to include a missile complex, surface-to-air missile defenses, special forces encampment, and a bunch of other things. And there was one picture published in one of the open sources that got one of my high-level contacts very excited and worked up, and the net result was that the entire country of Venezuela, which is not routinely surveyed by our reconnaissance satellites, it is quote-unquote under a microscope right now. They're looking for anything and everything that's out of the ordinary. So we were facing one of the worst threats probably in the history of the country, and the American public was denied the information. Why? Word is that the government wants us to keep our eye firmly focused on the Persian Gulf, where the New World Order types are busy doing everything they can think of to foment World War III. Either through a false flag operation, such as has been reported torpedoing the USS Enterprise with an Israeli sub and blaming it on the Iranians. The Iranians have threatened to do things. The Israelis are determined to attack. The extraterrestrials, extra-dimensionals are warning Israel not to do anything or it will pay a very heavy price. And recently they demonstrated their capabilities in full daylight when they removed in front of press, merchant ship crews, and warship crews from several countries, no less than 40 Iranian naval vessels of various sorts, many of them impressed civilian vessels loaded with explosives, and somebody at the controls and a contact used to ram into the tankers. Broad daylight, poof, they all went away.
Okay. I appreciate all of this. It's fascinating information, if true. but I need to sort of separate it all out so that we can kind of drill down on each thing, if you don't mind.
Right.
And I do appreciate that you've basically been giving us sort of an overview here. I want to go back to the
The traffic, people who've never heard of the blog, John Kettler Investigates, or you can just type www.johnkettler.com and it'll take you right there. I've got really good sources both on the planet and off the planet. And we can get into that later on if you like. And then do you want me to segue into the missiles?
Yeah, why don't you do that? Except this time when you explain the missile situation, could you please do the setup? In other words, describe for the people that don't know what we're talking about, what was the threat or implied threat, and then how was it handled? And if you could do kind of a blow-by-blow on that.
Okay, I'll try. I received word from one of my highly cleared terrestrial sources that the U.S. had detected the arrival and the beginnings of preparation for firing of what was initially thought to be 10, but turned out to be 20 North Korean supplied what they call Masudon missiles. These are copies of the Russian R-27 or SSN-6 submarine-launched ballistic missile, but just like the Iraqis stretched Scuds during the first Gulf War, these are stretched R-27s. They have about 2,800 nautical mile range, which from Maracaibo, Venezuela, which is basically the area they were located in, could cover almost any target in the, what we call the lower 48, the contiguous United States. The count was later revised to 20 each TEL or transporter erector launcher. Had one missile assigned to it plus a refire missile. Information that we got was that the North Koreans, in addition to supplying the missiles, supplied biological warfare warheads, which we believe to be militarized anthrax in one case, and something that just dissolves the lungs on inhalation. We don't really know what it was. Apparently the Pakistanis supplied dirty bomb warheads, and the whole thing was funded by Iran. The missiles were transported from North Korea to Venezuela, unloaded, we're not sure where, because we didn't find out about this till some sort of overhead reconnaissance asset detected the missiles in a clearing. President of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, expected tribute from the drug cartels for moving through his territory, and when he was denied, he rather foolishly threatened to drop missiles on the main transit route for the cartel through Mexico. So the cartel got all excited about this and vowed vengeance, and was in the process of hunting for the missiles when an off-planet source delivered a map marked with a big X where his missiles were. So the cartel staged a ground assault, caught half of the guards, a fleet essentially, and with RPG and small arms fire, RPG, rocket-propelled grenade, that thing you see in street fighting on all the TV clips, destroyed 10 of the missiles plus 10 of the reserves and the launchers. The next go-around,
please talk to the audience.
hello everyone.
Okay.
Trying to see if I can be heard.
Yes. So you guys can hear? Okay, very good. So let's start again from the beginning. Please, let's just pretend that nothing happened and just give your really quick bio, and then let's go to describe some of the events that have been happening to you since we went live the last time, and then you'll move right over to describe what happened with the missile crisis.
Okay, real short version of the bio. Son of a defense engineer, spent 40 years working on radar countermeasures, radar countermeasures, same stuff for laser, infrared, things of that sort. I went into military aerospace. I worked 11 years for Hughes Aircraft Missile Systems Group. We built almost every tactical missile in the inventory: Phoenix missile, the TOW anti-tank missile, the Maverick anti-tank missile, GBU-15 guided bomb, a bunch of other things. We also built the thing they call the AMRAAM or AIM-120 Slammer, which is now in service. And then I moved on to Rockwell, where I was supposed to do Soviet strategic threat analysis, and wound up doing operational readiness and supportability, which is how fast can you turn an airplane around, rearm, refuel it. We had to protect the pilot against nuclear, biological, and chemical threats, things of that nature. I'm a founding member of the Directed Energy Weapons Working Group at Rockwell, which is now owned by Boeing. Hughes is now owned by Raytheon, at least the parts I worked for. And I worked on the AC-130U gunship. I worked on the B-1B. I worked on the maritime patrol aircraft. I worked on an advanced close air support plane. And the last program I worked was National Aerospace Plane, the military version. That was a special access program with multiple levels of security. You had to be read into each one. I had all of those tickets. I was cleared for secret, no foreign, warning intelligence sources and methods involved, critical nuclear weapon design information, special access tickets on NAST, and a bunch of other things. And was in the process of being cleared for top secret when I left military aerospace on June 20th of 1989. Since then, I worked on Panama Deception, which was an expose of Operation Just Cause, the invasion of Panama, and the historical background. I won the Academy Award. I have a primary research credit in that. I was interviewed in Under Call It Murder, which was about the Vince Foster murder. And I've worked on a bunch of other projects. Now I have this blog that's exploding. So that's the short overview.
Okay, talk about your blog exploding.
Well, in the space of a handful of weeks, it went from we were thrilled to have 25 visitors a day to we've had as many as 20,000 plus. And a lot of that has had to do with the exposure from being on your show, and we're very grateful for all.
Venezuela situation for a moment, because I did have some feedback in that regard, and I want to make sure that we understand what it was you were saying about that and what really did happen over there. I've got a person who apparently has somebody who's in the military in Venezuela. They were, I guess, born in Maracaibo. And they're talking, basically they believe that the port that you were talking about that the missiles would have had to go into would have been way too obvious, and that that there's no way that they could have been sort of have had missiles out there on display and the people not know about it. Do you know how the missiles were transported into the country?
We know that they arrived aboard a North Korean container ship, name unknown, and quite possibly changed since. They did not come through the Panama Canal. They came a long way, and the U.S. did not detect the missiles until the missiles were in the clearing, being beginning stages of fueling. These are liquid-fueled missiles. They take some time to fuel, and it's a very dangerous process. The propellants are what we call hypergolic, which means they explode on contact unless you've got them in, carefully designed reaction chamber. So you're talking about hydrazine, a drop the size of a pinhead will kill you on contact with your skin, and fuming red nitric acid would lead a hole through you in record time.
Okay, so stop right there. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just so that we understand what's happening here, because I understand that you have a military background. A lot of our listeners will not. I certainly don't. At this moment, you're saying it came in on a container ship. I assume that the container was then transported from what, a ship to the back of a truck?
Possibly. We really don't know. 'Cause
Okay.
We, the U.S., did not detect the missiles until they were in a clearing in the jungle near the beach.
Okay, that's better. Okay.
Near Maracaibo.
Near
That's what I was
Maracaibo?
told.
You're saying near
Near.
Maracaibo. In a clearing
Right.
in the
But
jungle.
Not in. Near. And I've identified a place on Route 6 that kind of fits that criteria, but I've never been given any kind of grid coordinates for where this is or
Okay.
anything like that. But I'm a pretty good analyst. I used to have to do things like lay out where enemy systems were on the battlefield according to doctrine and things like that. So
Really?
I'm pretty good.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you say,
I
okay,
looked at the. Go ahead.
when you say there were the missiles were then being fueled, they didn't come in with fuel in them, if I'm understanding
No,
you
they did
correctly?
not. No, they did not.
Okay, and then,
No, they're hollow, thin shells, basically, that are pretty fragile. And then what you have to do, because if you get a puncture in one of those things while it's fully fueled, I don't know if you remember the movie K-219, but they had a leak in a missile just like that, and they had a terrible fire on board the submarine because of it.
okay, but so you're saying they came unfueled and they had to put fuel in them.